Hello, welcome to It's Your Time You're Wasting with me, David Didow, and this handsome devil, Martin Robinson. It's been 4 years since our last broadcast, a little over, I think, and we're back. No one asked for it, no one wanted it, but we're back, and we're talking about group work. Martin, you've got a little nugget from the internet, from social media to share with us.
Yeah, it's a couple of weeks ago, I think now, and it was a Twitter. Is it called Twitter? No, it's called X, isn't it? An
I'm
X
not saying
discussion.
that.
No, no, awful thing. A Twitter discussion, and it involved a well-known head teacher called Catherine Birbal Singh, who's the world's or the country's strictest head teacher, I believe.
I think the world.
The world. Okay.
Yeah.
And she said something about group work where she stated, "We never do group work at Michaela." And I sort of chirped in, "You run a choir." And she said to that, she said, "I said group work, not never put kids in groups."
Mm.
Now, is there a
Yeah.
difference between group work and working in groups? Now, to me, group work is working in groups. But when I pointed that out, you chirped up and disagreed with me. Do you want to
Yeah.
explore
So
that?
this can become quite circular, but I think there's a wide understanding, a broad understanding that the group work, when it's spoken about in education circles, is a set of pedagogical practices that teachers used to be trained in, for teaching the curriculum with through the mechanism of children leading that process themselves while in groups, either to create some sort of artifact or to better understand the material that they're meant to be processing. And that putting people in groups, people being in groups, is a part of human culture and heritage. We've almost certainly been operating in groups since the development of language. Probably which came first. I'm sure they co-evolved. In order to hunt antelope and take down saber-toothed tigers and all of that kind of thing. And I think most of the groups in which we operate, I don't think people look at and go, "Oh, I'm doing group work now." So maybe, arguably, it's useful to draw a distinction. I think what Catherine means is we don't do that first bit. We don't do lessons in which the curriculum is taught via group work. But as she said to you, they do run a choir, they do have football teams, and whether or not we want to call that group work is
Yeah, it's
open.
uh, it's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, it's perhaps a false dichotomy as well between saying this is group work and this isn't group work when we're talking about working in groups. I think it's um, a pretty continuous thread between the two. That there's so many things. For instance, I was trained to teach group work mainly because I teach drama, and
Well,
it's
I
an
was
essential
trained
part. Huh?
to teach group work, and I was an English
Yeah.
teacher. Then was the times.
Though strangely, of course, the national curriculum for drama doesn't
Doesn't
exist
exist.
except in English. So the only place, so perhaps you should be as an English teacher,
Well, that was very
having,
much the vibe back in the late 1990s when I was training to be a teacher. That there was a feeling of, if you weren't teaching children in groups, you were somehow doing something wrong. You were somehow letting them down. You were blighting their life chances, and that's a pendulum that's very much, I think, swung the other way. I think you were telling me the other day about an experience where drama teaching is, as you'd understand it, is banned.
no, drama teaching, strangely enough, wasn't banned in terms of uh, allowing the subject to be on the curriculum. What was banned was doing anything practical
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
drama class. So you could have drama as long as it was at desks. And
yeah.
this was arrived at in 3 different schools by 3 different
Wow.
head teachers, saying, looking at the class and thinking, basically from a discipline point of view, that's chaos. We can't have that.
Right, right, right. Which takes us to the idea that you'd very much argue that it's possible to have really, really effective group work, and then for some teachers, for many children, their experience of being asked to work in groups or putting children in groups is that it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think part of what Catherine maybe and certainly others point to as group work is bad group work. Group work goes wrong rather than good group work or good working in groups. I don't think it matters what you call it, um, done well. But then why would you do that? Well, in drama, you have to do it because
Right.
you are structuring a subject around the idea of children working in groups successfully for exams or for for other purposes. Um, and certainly, I could go into how you do that successfully. I'm I, I'm interested in the fact that certain schools these days, like I just said, are not allowing teachers to even find out how to do it successfully or have the structures in place to allow them to do it successfully. And
Yeah.
perhaps it's a skill that's going out of the profession.
Well, never, yeah. Things change, things come back, and we'll probably be sitting here in the future bemoaning the fact that everyone's doing group work, and that was definitely the case, or definitely felt the case that that was the pressure for that to be how classrooms were conceived a few years ago. And it's really interesting that that's changed apparently so rapidly and so thoroughly. And even as recently as my own children being at school, um, they would come home and they would tell stories about, I was put in a group with some boys who effed about, and I had to do all the work, and it was horrible. And I think many teachers will have experiences of asking children to work in groups without maybe having the skill and the understanding of how to do it effectively, and being very bruised by that experience. And so, we can all accept that there are better ways to get children to work cooperatively. The study that's regularly cited is Robert Slavin's survey of group work, in which he essentially, you can condense that to sort of saying there are 2 conditions for effective group work, and that is collective accountability, individual responsibility, but collective outcomes, collectively achieved outcomes, so that you can only achieve the outcome through working together, but everybody is individually accountable for their participation. And that's very much, I think, how you'd approach the matter in your drama lessons, isn't it?
Yeah. So because I'm a believer in groups working effectively, I didn't start with group work. And so the first place in a drama lesson was to work on your own individually, and then in a pair, which is my first idea is the dynamic nature of working in a pair.
Yeah.
And also you can see as a teacher who's perhaps working more effectively than others, and you can intervene quicker. And so let's say from year 10 to year 11, when they're doing the GCSE in drama, where they had to finish up with a group project. At the beginning of that first term or so, they would never work in a group. They would work in a pair or solo. That would be it. And I'll be building up the discipline and the structure of saying that they have to involve. But I also do it very quickly, very short tasks, very
Mm.
do this, and physically, and they're always doing something, and they had to work in a way that's obvious from afar that they're doing what I'm saying.
You'd model that as well, would you?
You'd model it and you would stop it and get people to see each pair, or the good pairs, or pairs that are working effectively, shall we
Yeah.
say, at the different
Not
points.
bad pairs.
Yeah, and very, very quick stuff. So it'd be, you know, um, interesting to see teachers these days use similar sort of, I think, teach like a champion things. I think I was doing that in drama in the 1990s, but in a completely different context that I thought was
Yeah.
dynamic and artistic rather than oppressive or whatever it
Yeah.
is when you see it in the classroom state. But anyway,
Right. Whereas my experience and that of other teachers was that we would be attempting, we'd be putting people in groups without doing the hard yards, hoping that that would in some way engage students
yes,
to be more thoughtful about the material, and then feeling very frustrated with the outcomes of that and thinking, is it worth the effort? And I think there's an argument, at least, for saying in practical subjects where the end product is only accomplishable by a group, then the argument's made for you. You have to do that. In other subjects where groups are not essential, that maybe it isn't worth the effort. Where would you come on that?
yeah, I think, and this is where you get into teacher tasks and things like that. I mean, perhaps in an English lesson, you want to act out a scene because part of
Mm.
it, the English national curriculum is to do that. So to me, there is a structure in place that could build towards that.
Yeah.
But I don't think you just go, right, here's a scene, you've got to get into fives, off you go, because it will be chaos. I mean, the next part from moving from the pair is to move into the four,
Mm.
which you can do in a classroom, seated at a desk quite easily, turn the people in front back. But doing that again, you've got to be really, really structured, allowing it very short, focused tasks. Again, I'm talking about half a minute to a minute to start with, and if it falls apart, back to the solo, back to the pair, and build it up again. In the end, before they did their group work, I would have a group of 30 in a class, doing a play in a day. I'd take them off timetable for a day and leave them to lead that through the day. Now, after that, they'll go into their groups of 5 or 6 or whatever it happened to be to do the 10-week preparation for their final pieces. And they were ready to work on their own. So I do think there is a place for it. Should it be in every classroom dictated from a head teacher saying, this is the way we do things here? I don't think so. I think there are different subject points. You might want a small debate. You might want something discussed. You might want to run an experiment or whatever it is in different subjects. That the teacher is it best placed to know whether that's a good idea or not. To blanket ban as well as to blanket impose, I think, are not necessarily helpful things. But if you don't know how to do it,
Yeah.
then there's no point in doing it.
So the point we're making here is that essentially that we should be respecting the subjects and the disciplinary nature in which performance and knowledge interacts within those subject domains. I think at the heart of this, or maybe underneath this, I think the debate about whether children should work individually or pairs or groups isn't really the driving force of what animates people. It's should learning be student led or should it be teacher led? And that there are relative pros and cons to those positions, and that we can evaluate from lesson to lesson, from subject to subject, about whether the merits outweigh the costs of working in a particular way at a particular time. And for me, I think it's useful to think about three different lenses with which to view student-led versus teacher-led. The first of which is workload. How much effort is it to do a particular thing? What are we expecting of teachers? What are we expecting of students? The second is effectiveness. Like, does it work? Do people end up better off as a result? in your drama lessons, with them able to devise a play in groups. Clearly, that's effective. That's important. In my English lesson, probably less effective. And then the other one, which I don't think's thought about that much, is equity. That what is most beneficial for those with least, for those who come into education from the most disadvantaged backgrounds.
Right. I mean, again, this is if you struck. I think we go back to the thing about bad group work, and if you are, I mean, I would always get to a point of trying to get groups to function, people to function individually within the group in a certain way. So I point out you mustn't be a disruptor. You mustn't be a sponge, just absorb everything. You mustn't, you can be a follower, but a supporter follower. You support the group and you're following what the group wants to do, if you like. And you can be a leader, but you don't want to be a leader all the time. So you want some sort
You
of
don't want to
balance
dominate.
within that. You don't want to dominate. So you don't want some sort of oligarch or whatever they're called, leader just telling everyone what to do. And the best thing to be is a sort of leader supporter, that you support the group aims and that you're a leader. Now, that is the teacher intervening on behalf of the students within that group who perhaps do find group work more challenging, more difficult, and to actually ensure that they are part of that group in such a way that they are leading it, they're having an equal say in what's going on, rather than just saying, right, get into groups, off you go. Oh, those kids there are just failing because it's group work, because it's the inequity of it is works against them because of class, because of gender,
Yeah,
because of whatever it happens to be.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think so. So that you balance those things. So that if you're making the decision that it's the most effective way for a subject or a topic within a subject to be explored, then absolutely putting the effort in to everybody being able to do that successfully is a position of equity. That like just saying just get into groups, that then clearly the children who are from who find that easiest are going to be benefited above those that are going to struggle more with that, and that's not cool. But if we've got a situation where we think that actually it's it's a less effective way, or we're neutral on the effectiveness of whether student-led or teacher-led learning should be the dominant sort of process. I think then it's useful to think that for students from more advantaged background, they're more likely to have the wherewithal and the social connections, and maybe the good fortune to be quicker and all of that sort of thing, that they can be successful despite suboptimal teaching,
Yeah,
and that some children are only going to be successful because of really effective teaching. And I think that's a really useful way to think about the choices that we make.
it's also important to think that actually group work isn't for the teacher to do their marking whilst everything
Well,
else is going on. You actually, to me, you actually have to intervene a lot more. You actually have to be on
yeah.
your toes a lot more than perhaps when you're whole classroom teaching, or
Well,
they're sitting in silence or
I
whatever.
think actually, to do any kind of teaching effectively, you've got to be on your toes,
Mm,
regardless of how you set up your classroom and what's going on within it. And it was really interesting to me working in with a school where the teachers were saying teaching in this way is really hard work. It's really exhausting for me. I'd like to do some student-led learning so I can kind of take a break.
mm.
and and I was quite surprised by that as a position. The in a lesson, should there be opportunities for teachers to take it easy for a bit? It's an interesting. We talk a lot about teachers' workload, and we don't want teachers unnecessarily working and doing things which are unproductive. But do we want them working hard in lessons I think it's hard to think about that being unnecessary workload. We
It's
probably, and then to your point, really, really effective student-led learning will involve the teacher working as hard, if not harder.
and then we've got the other point, which is the process. So if you think about it being a 2-year process to get them to work in groups well, at the end of it, you've got them working in groups under their own steam.
Yeah,
It should be led at that point. So it's almost a novice to expert process. So when they're working in groups for their final project, their final productions, it should be okay for me to have a cover teacher come in and them to work in groups and there not to be chaos. And you have to get to that point in order to allow them to work as they should be working, but also to the point of saying you can be disciplined, you can work under your own steam, you can get to that point, and they can. And that would be my holy grail. That's what I would aim for. That, you know, because I had to go to exam meetings and things like that over that time. So I knew that there would be times when the cover teachers would be called in. So it would be a complete waste of time for them to just sit down at desks and work in their books or something like that for no apparent reason, which they're more likely to disrupt because they know it's not purposeful. The
right.
purpose of it is very important there. So is there also
Well, I
the
think
idea
there's a
of educative independence to be able to lead your own learning at some point is quite an important aim.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think that there's definitely a discussion about means and end. That if your end is to have a particular approach to work and a particular ethic, and the process that you build in is to achieve that end, that's one thing. But if our means is we want people to be independent, so therefore we're going to do independent learning, then I think that breaks down a little bit more. So
Exactly.
obviously everybody wants students to be independent. Everybody wants students, young people, to make great choices and to be able to buckle down when it's important and focus. I don't think we'd come across anybody that's saying that those things are not worthwhile aims of education. How you get there is the whole of the question, isn't it?
Yeah. Instead of, I think there's a lot of idea that perhaps like learning to swim by throwing someone in the deep end isn't necessarily the best way of
Yeah,
getting someone to learn to do these things.
and I think the learn to swim thing's a great example because there are people who say, "Well, it worked for me," and there's no doubt that you can find anything that worked for somebody, but at least some people that have been thrown in the deep end have drowned,
Yeah, they're not
and
with us anymore, so you can't ask them.
exactly. So that argument that I think sometimes we make as teachers, it worked for me, it worked for my students. Well, what are you? What's the counterfactual? Like, what if you tried something else? Might it have been more effective than just chucking them in and hoping they didn't drown? And of course, it would be. Everybody benefits from not running the risk of drowning.
Mm. And but there is the wider point of group work, I suppose, or allowing kids to socialize with each other, is that socialization is one of the aims of school. We're
Yeah,
not just into you must learn a certain amount of knowledge. You also have to learn how to become a society, how to become a culture, how to become whatever it happens to be.
and I think this is at least in part part of Catherine's justification for banning group work as a pedagogical approach at Michaela, the idea of social loafing, the finding, I think it's sometimes called the Ringleman effect, that when you put people in a group to achieve a task, everybody pulls a bit less hard on the rope than if they were the only individual pulling on the rope. And there's been some interesting studies that show that when you put people in a room to discuss ideas, people are less creative than when they do that process on their own and share the ideas. And
I'm
so,
going to completely disagree with both those things, because through experience, I've seen the amount of work that groups will pull out of each other, and also the amount of creative work that will come out of it through the buzziness of working in a group, if you like, the collaborative effect. I think again we go back to group work done badly or group work done well is two very different things. But if it's done for a subject where it matters, I think that's also different. If you don't need to do it, why do it? That's part of it.
because it's so much work to do it well.
Yeah, and for the kids to buy into the
The
ethos,
purpose.
but you're going to do much better as a football team playing as a football team. You're going to do better as a choir. So that there are points that you will create better stuff by working together, collaboratively, teamwork, whatever you want to call it. There are elements that it works, and it works very well. But the socialization point, and you say about social loafing, you have to teach against that. You have to work against that right from day one. You don't just sort of, oh, what do
We
we do
also
now?
have to understand, I think, that there is a tendency in people for that to be the
No,
case.
I was at a meeting the other day, and we were given a task to do in groups, and there was one woman, five men who did the writing.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that it was your female colleague.
Yeah, she volunteered, but we didn't exactly
Did she have the
volunteer
neatest
quick enough.
handwriting?
And then we mucked around, and it wasn't,
Yeah.
it was social loafing completely. Why are we doing this? All this sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
I completely comprehend
Yeah.
and have taken part in
Yeah. Yeah. No, no,
that very
absolutely.
thing.
I think one of the things I'm sort of getting from your take on this, correct me if I've got this wrong, is that really effective group work it needs to be teacher led. It doesn't just happen. It's not a student led experience until right at the very end.
Yeah, you are building to a point of letting go, but like holding onto the saddle of someone learning to ride a bike,
Yeah.
or whatever. You are doing a lot in the first instance to let the further thing happen. The roots and the wings, is it Goethe? I don't know who talked about that, but the idea of you put some roots in place, and you make it part of a tradition as well of creating theatre or whatever, in order to let them fly at the end, that they
Yeah.
can do very well on their own.
Right. I think there's an interesting sort of, if we've got respect for subject disciplines, that the group performance in drama, for instance, should be sacred,
Yeah,
should be
absolutely.
sacrosanct,
Yeah,
should be protected and special and hallowed, and something that children are inducted into
yeah,
as
yeah.
this is an important experience. I think the best argument I ever heard for children, there's a point of view, there's a perspective in science teaching that practical lessons are a waste of time. Just it's better if the teacher demonstrates the experiment. And the best counter argument that I've heard is that even though the doing of the science practical is just going through the motions, there's something really important about going through those motions, that you're doing a junior version of science,
Mm,
and that experience is only happens within these boundaries
mm.
and only happens in this place, and that learning what that looks and feels like is an important outcome of the education process. I like that as an
Yeah,
argument. That feels right.
it's beautifully romantic, and it is part of the socialization. I mean, it is, and I'm a romantic, so I'm quite happy with that. But
Right.
the socialization point, kids working in early years, in primary, perhaps, that especially kids who went unsupervised in the playground, perhaps, even though they tend not to be unsupervised in the playground,
Yeah.
exactly. But the teacher can intervene, can encourage, can help develop the socialization, something we lost a lot of for a lot of kids over lockdowns and things like that, at key points perhaps, is something that is important, but it's not the be all and end all of every lesson in school all the time.
No, no, and it's sort of the other thing that reminds me of is the cry for children, the necessity for children to be taught 21st century skills, and collaboration being cited as an example of a skill that's really important in the 21st century, because obviously nobody did any
No.
collaborating before now. And I think one of the things that I think's interesting about that debate is that for the most part, children are finding, they collaborate all the time.
Mm.
They organise games of football. They go to parties. What they find it difficult to collaborate on is thinking about an academic subject. That's where they need our help and our direction. It's not the skill of collaboration per se. It's how to do it within a subject discipline.
And we could open that out to saying, well, there are kids with special needs who do find it difficult in all situations. And perhaps there is more work that could be done by schools there, or people outside of schools, or whatever,
Yeah, but also the counter to that, which is that some people are naturally introverted or naturally don't like being in social situations. Forcing them to be or telling them that that's bad is probably the wrong thing to do also.
It's an interesting one, that, because as a drama teacher, you are in an interesting situation there. What
Yes,
do I
and I
do?
guess I guess those children don't pick drama for their
Not
GCSE, do they?
necessarily, though I have had
Yeah, okay, that's
kids
great.
do
Yeah.
that. But yeah, you want to get them to the point of saying that they can perform,
Mm,
and to give them that opportunity to perform, just as you would give them the opportunity to hit a tennis ball, or whatever it happens to be in
for sure.
whatever subject, to swim. I think
Yeah.
you have to give them the opportunity to do it, and then later, if they want to not pursue it, that's fine. But they might be a better, person going to the cinema or sitting in a theatre because they've had that experience. Maybe.
Maybe. Well, listen, that's group work. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Why you might want to do it, and if you're going to do it, how you might want to do it. We're going to continue the conversation soon by going more deeply into paired conversations, and we're hopefully going to be joined by that giant of the education landscape, Thomas Sherrington.
Gosh, gosh. And talking of that, so we need to talk about pair work. We need three people to talk about that.
Of course. How else?
Paradoxical.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
See you soon.